Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we go week to week, watching something on a popular streamer, breaking it down, providing some context and recommendations along the way. In today's episode, Sona's back on the podcast. We'll be discussing the new HBO series, DTF St. Louis, starring Jason Bateman, David Harbour, Linda Cardellini, Richard Jenkins, and others in an excellent cast. I have more mixed feelings about this pilot episode. I'm intrigued, but have some questions as to how these different components of comedy and tragedy and some of the stylistic choices here merge together. Before I dig into that conversation with Sona, a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One is that tonight, hopefully tonight, I'll be able to publish yet another episode covering the finale of Industry, as well as this fourth episode of Paradise, which just premiered this morning. Darren is back from vacation. We'll be catching up on his trip, plus, of course, discussing both the Industry finale as well as the Paradise episode 4, and his thoughts on the season up until this point. The usual call-outs. If you'd like to reach out to us, email us at needsomeintroduction@gmail.com, or post a comment on Spotify, or post a comment on YouTube. And if you'd like to support the show, recommend this to your friends and family if they're watching any of these shows. Of course, we continue to also cover The Pit, and just published that episode less than 2 days ago at this point. So a bit of a logjam of these episodes, but they'll spread out as we wrap up some of these shows and onboard new ones. I do outline in my conversation with Sona some of the shows we'll be covering throughout this rest of this month, and I'll also be discussing with Darren some other coverage we can expect. What a month of premiere, so much coverage, so many new shows premiering, and we'll be sampling a bunch of them. Invincible, the final season of that. The Boys will be kicking off soon, the final season of that. We're getting this young Sherlock Holmes Guy Ritchie series premiering this very week. That's just a few of the things, and as I mentioned, a whole bunch of other titles that Sona and I will be at least sampling over the course of the month, and I'm sure Darren and I will be sampling, plus some very big theatrical releases coming as well. The Academy Awards, so many different topics to be covered in the upcoming month. Subscribe so you get notifications when all of that becomes available. Okay, before I get into my conversation with Sona, we are just 2 weeks out now from the Academy Awards. Most of the big award bodies have given out their awards for the year, so things have crystallized. But most important of all, if you are behind and want to catch up on any of these things, where can you watch them? They're almost all available to stream right now. So I'm going to start with the movies, work my way down that list, and then some other highlights in the other categories, letting you know what the odds are based on the betting odds right now for each one of those titles to win in those categories. But most importantly, where can you watch them right now? Again, this is not my preference. This is not the order I would rank these films. This is purely based on likelihood of winning awards. Okay, in the best movie category, F1 is all the way at the bottom, well under 1% chance of winning, available to stream on Apple TV. What a blast, a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, check it out if you have Apple TV. Old school formula for a sports film. Not a prestigious film, but a lot of fun. Number 9, I just watched this one again over the weekend with my wife. The third time I've seen this film. I don't usually watch movies 3 times within a few months, but watched it once by myself, watched it again to discuss it with Darren, and now watched it with my wife because we have this Peacock subscription for the Olympics. And one of the most popular titles on there, of course, was Begonia, available on Peacock and coming to Amazon Prime in April. So if you have Amazon Prime but you don't have Peacock, keep an eye out for that one. A very odd conspiracy thriller, comic, terrifying, horrifying at times, with an ending that will have you asking questions. So, of course, we covered it, full episode breakdown of that here in the podcast feed, if you happen to have watched that recently. Next up, Frankenstein. This has a pretty good likelihood of winning at least one of the craft services type, whether it's set design or costume design, perhaps. The Academy Awards, of course, love Del Toro. They've already given him Best Picture and Best Director in the past. This year, though, this is not going to win, but definitely has some love among the Academy Awards. Very easy to watch this, by the way, on Netflix. Number 4, Marty Supreme. This opened just over the holidays. It is one of the highest grossing films. I mean, actually, aside from F1, it is the second highest grossing film here on this list, and also opened relatively recently, just around the holidays. Still in theaters. and has just become available for digital rental and will be coming to HBO Max in April. So if you're waiting on that one for streaming, of course, we will be covering DTF St. Louis and other HBO series throughout the next couple of months. And Marty Supreme will be debuting on HBO Max during that time period. Okay, we're up to number 6 from the bottom. Sentimental Value, the Joachim Trier film, which has a pretty good chance of winning Best Supporting Actor for Stellan Skarsgård, and will probably win Best Foreign Language Film. And this is coming to Hulu on March 23rd, just a week after the Academy Awards. If Sentimental Value does not win Best Foreign Language Film, then it will be The Secret Agent, the Wagner Moura starring Brazilian film, a thriller and political drama with some elements of supernatural, an interesting concoction, a film that I didn't fully engage with the first time I watched it, but I've thought about it so many times since then. So very entertaining to watch and perhaps even more interesting on a rewatch. So good thing that it's going to be, or I should say is available to stream right now, just premiered yesterday, I believe, on Hulu, and that's The Secret Agent. Okay, at number 4, other than the top 3 titles, this is the only, and this is once again based on those betting odds, the only film that even cracks 1% aside from the top 3, and that is Train Dreams, also on Netflix, also has a chance of winning an Academy Award, perhaps for Best Adapted Screenplay, probably not, and perhaps, actually better odds on this one, of getting a cinematography award. Well-deserved, beautiful digital cinematography that nonetheless has the warmth of what you would expect to see in an analog film stock. Really just beautiful cinematography. And Darren and I both had this in our top 10s at the end of the year and also discussed it here in detail on the podcast. And that's on Netflix. I think I said that, but it's on Netflix. Number 3, maybe a 5% odds or something of winning. This is my least favorite of all the nominees. It's not saying it's a bad movie. It's my least favorite of this batch of films. So take all that with a grain of salt. It's Hamnet. This is available on Peacock this week. It'll be premiering later this week. Still in theaters as well. A huge hit overseas, by the way, but a modest hit here in the US. Directed by Chloe Zhao. I was a big fan of Nomadland, by the way, which Chloe Zhao already won Best Director and Best Film for that film. Not as big a fan of this, and I'd have to spoil the film to get into my issues I have with it, and some of them might be from the book that it's adapted from. Nonetheless, didn't quite work for me, but does have some incredible production design and an amazing performance by the always amazing Jessie Buckley. Okay, number 2, if there's any spoiler for what is pretty clearly going to win Best Picture this year, if there's any chance of a spoiler, it is Sinners, and that is the number 2 based on betting odds. Available on HBO Max. And number 1, One Battle After Another, which has won almost every single award for Best Picture this year. On the directing side of things, very similarly, One Battle After Another, Paul Thomas Anderson is the leader for winning Best Director. Ryan Coogler, number 2 for Sinners. Chloe Zhao, number 3 for Hamnet. Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme is in the 4th slot. And Joachim Trier, number 5 for Sentimental Value. Okay, and the actress side of things, the clear-cut winner is Jessie Buckley in Hamnet, of course, available this week on Hulu, as I mentioned. Number 2, if there's any spoiler, is going to be Rose Byrne in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, available currently on HBO Max. Renata Rensvi for Sentimental Value is in the 3rd slot, available on Hulu later this month. Emma Stone in Begonia, currently available on Peacock. And lastly, Kate Hudson in Song Sung Blue, available on Peacock. I've seen this movie, by the way. Her performance is totally fine. I'm a fan of hers in general. Charming, very nice. It's a nice movie. Nothing, this should not, I don't think, should get Academy Award nominations, but she's very nice in the performance. And she sings her own, she does her own singing here in the movie. And lovely, lovely voice. So yeah, good for her. And the movie's a modest hit, so good. On the actor side of things, still leading the charge, Timothée Chalamet. Michael B. Jordan has moved up a little bit here. Could be a spoiler here for Sinners. Wagner Moura in The Secret Agent at number 3. Leonardo DiCaprio, who was vying for, on the betting charts, was vying for number 1, has faded drastically in the last few weeks or so, considering he hasn't won a single one of these major awards. And lastly here, but an excellent performance, Ethan Hawke in Blue Moon, which is currently available on Netflix, just premiered recently. Highly recommend this. Very sad but charming, very funny but tragic story featuring a truly astounding performance from Ethan Hawke, practically unrecognizable here in the role. On the Best Supporting Actress side of things, Teyana Taylor, Amy Madigan, and Wunmi Mosaku are practically in a dead tie for first place. Teyana Taylor from One Battle After Another, Amy Madigan in Weapons, also available on HBO Max, and Wunmi Mosaku from Sinners. And that leaves the two actresses. Wonderful performances here, especially my favorite of this batch of performances. Wunmi Mosaku, I think, is fantastic. Would love to see her win Best Supporting Actress. All these performances. Honestly, what an incredible category. Elle Fanning, the least of these, still a wonderful performance in Sentimental Value. But my favorite of these remainder, Inga Ibsdottir Lilius from Sentimental Value. What an incredible performance. So exactly the type of performance I like. So subtle. It's the heart of the film in a very subtle way. Beautiful performance there. But Wunmi Mosaku in Sinners, maybe my favorite performance there. A small performance, but really powerful. The emotional weight of that film really comes through in her performance. Amy Madigan, an incredible, flashy, career-capping performance from her. In most years, this would be enough for her to win Best Supporting Actress just as a career retrospective type award. But Teyana Taylor is probably going to win with an astounding performance in One Battle After Another. So what a really powerful group of performances here. Anybody nominated here has got to be very happy. And then Best Supporting Actor, Stellan Skarsgård seems to have slipped out of number one position, although it is that kind of career-capping award that still seems like it could occur. Sean Penn has apparently seemed like he had faded out and now is back with his performance, a great performance in One Battle After Another. Delroy Lindo for Sinners, again, feels more like a career retrospective award. A great performance, but pretty small performance. There are other supporting male performances in Sinners itself that probably I would have put here above him, but love to see him getting some kind of recognition. He's been around for such a long time. Jacob Elordi in Frankenstein. My favorite thing about Frankenstein, definitely the Jacob Elordi scenes work in a way that the rest of the film doesn't quite work for me. And of course, Benicio del Toro, that if I had to give it between Sean Penn, who I love his performance, or Del Toro, because they're both in the same film, I probably would go to Del Toro because I just love that performance. Is just so out of left field, but so believable and so zen. He is sensei in that movie, of course, but what a fun performance, to say the least. And another film I want to shout out here, there is the Iranian thriller. Of course, we're given the news currently about us being involved with this war in Iran. Interesting to see a film that deals with the quiet, mundane protests against the current regime there. But this film, It Was Just an Accident, which, despite the fact that you think it's going to be really heavy, is actually a comedic thriller. A lot of comedic thrillers on our list of nominations this year, by the way. A comedic thriller that deals with some very dark material, but in always entertaining and often light manner. And that is currently available on Hulu as well, and has a decent shot of winning Best Original Screenplay. Okay, I think that's the highlights of the awards and where you can watch them. If you have any of those streamers, of course, you'll have lots to watch. On Peacock, you have Begonia, you have Hamnet. On HBO Max, you can watch One Battle After Another or Sinners. You'll be able to watch Marty Supreme once that premieres in a month or so. And Weapons, of course, for that incredible supporting actress performance. If you have Hulu, you can watch Sentimental Value. You can watch The Secret Agent. You can watch It Was Just an Accident. A lot of foreign language coverage there. And if you have Netflix, you can watch Frankenstein. You can watch Train Dreams, both nominated for Best Picture. And you can watch Blue Moon with Ethan Hawke's great performance. So lots to watch. Do check out a lot of great performances in that list. And great films as well. All right, let's get into that conversation. Sona and I discussing this first episode of DTF St. Louis, an episode called Cornhole. Hello, Sona. It's been a while. We haven't talked in a month or so, not since we were covering, what were we covering? Oh, the end, of course, of Night Manager.
Yes, I'm excited to be back. I guess Night Manager was kind of forgettable in the end.
It was. And it was very meh, by the way. Our ratings also just kind of meh. I don't think there was too much enthusiasm about that show. Although I think the ratings were pretty good. I mean, it's so hard to know what's popular or not in these streaming worlds, but it seemed to do fine. And it did seem to create some social media chatter. So I guess it was totally fine. And we did have some feedback from our listeners as well. But I had a couple of emails and posts on Spotify asking, where is Sona? So Sona is
Aw,
back, everybody.
I love that. Thank you to anyone who missed me.
Did by chance did you watch anything other than the Olympics? Did your son get into the Olympics at all?
It's a good question. We watched a little bit of the ice hockey,
Nice.
but other
Exciting
than
game.
that, I think we are much more a Summer Olympics family than
Yes,
a Winter
yes.
Olympics family because that has the soccer, first of all,
Of
which
course.
is super important in our particular home. And then also the track and field events are pretty exciting to watch. The gymnastics is always fun to watch. Yeah, I think we're just more of a Summer Olympics type of home.
I think in general, everybody's more Summer Olympics, and there was a lot of curling, a lot of curling. There's one thing,
Yeah, which I mean, it does pass the time, but
yeah.
it's hard to get super invested in it.
I mean, I get invested in only the fact that, if you've played like bocce or something, you can get a pretty easy feel for the game itself. But it really is something you just put on in the background, not something you get really vested in.
Exactly. It's something that's on in the restaurant while you're eating, so you watch it.
I've never ever been into figure skating, but my daughter did get into it a little bit. She was like dancing around the house trying to do twists in the air, which was fun to watch.
Yeah, when I was her age, I was super into figure skating.
And it's funny, I have never been into it. And somehow this time around, I was perpetually terrified. Like it was like every time they were in the air, I'm like, don't fall down, which
Well,
is
I think
part of the appeal.
also when you reach middle age, the risk of injury anytime you hurt yourself is exponentially greater. So you look at it and you think, oh my God, you could incapacitate yourself for years if you fall down.
Yes, especially after you see Lindsay Vaughn like seriously
Yes.
injure
Oh,
herself, right? It's like don't
yikes.
after 40, don't get on the slopes.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, my wife still goes skiing, but she doesn't ski all the time. She only goes skiing occasionally. And then she goes on these very aggressive hills. And I don't like it because, first of all, she will sometimes go 2 years without skiing. So she's out of practice. And I know she skied her whole entire life, but she's not a spring chicken anymore. If she goes down that hill the wrong way, it's going to be really ugly. So,
Well, on the other end of the scale, my son actually just had a laser tag party over the weekend where we had space for parents to play. And I have never heard so many complaints about joint pain in my life.
oh my God, we just played pickleball this weekend at an indoor pickleball court with the kids. We took the kids out and we were playing pickleball, and my legs are all sore. It's just like, I'm not used to having to change direction this quickly.
Exactly.
And this is just pickleball, by the way. If this is tennis, I would have pulled something for sure. Anything you've been catching up on in this time off you had?
Right. That's how this started. Not that is coming to mind. So maybe if I did watch something like The Night Manager, it was not super memorable.
Did you see the Rose Byrne film by chance?
I was just thinking when we started talking that I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, and I really need to get to it. I'm very excited to watch it, and it's working against me because it's like I want the perfect environment and the perfect mood. So I'm not just jamming it in when I have a little bit of free time,
Yeah.
but as a result, I haven't watched it yet.
And so at the head of this episode, I was just running down where everybody can watch all the Academy Award nominees. Everything that's not currently available to stream is practically streaming this week. Like Hamnet will be streaming this later this week as well. So anyway, I put that all at the top of the episode. So if anybody skipped my preamble, do check that out. And specifically the Rose Byrne performance in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You is on HBO Max, but all that is listed there. So catch up on that. By the way, Sona, I was canceling Peacock today because I'm like, okay, the Olympics have passed. I'm going to cancel Peacock. And as I was canceling, they offered me like basically 6 months of very, very cheap service. So I'm like, I accepted the 6 months at pennies per month, but I also was going through the premiere calendar to see, well, what is forthcoming. And there's been a lot of premieres on Peacock. Like I watched The Burbs, the Keke Palmer Burbs, which has been very popular, by the way, on Peacock. I watched the first couple episodes. It was fine. I just didn't get that into it. But they've had a lot of premieres leading up to the Olympics, and of course, a little bit afterwards as well, like all throughout February. And of course, to hook people in. But there's not many things on the premiere calendar. It's like kind of like, okay, we got them. And now we'll just, which is the usual pattern with Peacock, by the way. If I like get a subscription for a really, really good deal, then immediately after they offer the deal, they're like kind of like no big releases for the next 6 months. I'm like, well, this is why I don't renew the subscription.
Right.
But just to let you know, Sona, because we're sharing the subscription, it's still active. So, and by the way, speaking of,
thank you.
My wife started watching All Her Fault, and she's on episode 2 right now. So if you wanted to watch that, maybe you guys can have a podcast conversation about it.
How's she liking it so far?
It's basically what I thought too, but she likes this a little bit more than I do, which she thinks it's like trashy and silly. And I when I mentioned it to you that at the end of episode 1, you think that the stakes are maybe not that over the top. And they're like, I can't believe all these people killed each other. And you're like, oh my God, 3/4 of the cast is dead by the end of the series. So it's a little over the top in that way too. But she is enjoying it as silly entertainment.
Right.
She also started reading The Slap, by the way. And I told her that part of the reason that I was interested in watching All Her Fault, it was that it was after reading The Slap. I'm like, oh, maybe this kind of book, this exploration of the suburbs, which by the way, we're going to see again in this series, is a interesting topic. And this could be an interesting way to explore it. And I thought it would be a little more high-minded, but then by episode 2, I'm like, no, this is kind of just a silly thriller.
Yeah.
But has some of that like deconstruction of the illusion of the performance of suburbia. So it's still there, but I'd say that by the time episode 2 and 3, like when there's just one twist after another, you're like, okay, this is like not really exploring this topic anymore. It passes the time. It's basically what it comes down to. So Sona will be covering this DTF show from week to week. Of course, we're talking about episode number 1, but look at this packed month we have. Some of the things we might dip into if the conversation gets a little thin. So this is kind of an erotic thriller, kind of. I mean, maybe we'll save that for the conversation as to whether you think it's actually playing in that sandbox or not, or just hinting at it. But there is another kind of, this has become a genre again, something that we thought was kind of missing as a genre. And this very week on Thursday, there is a binge coming to Netflix. I think it's only like 5 episodes, starring Rachel Weisz and Leo Woodall, about this woman who works at a university. She starts a relationship with a much younger man. She becomes like obsessed with him. And her husband, meanwhile, is being investigated for sexual impropriety, played by John Slattery. And this is called Vladimir. And I'm a big fan of Rachel Weisz, and she seems to be giving a really interesting performance in the trailer for this. So that comes out on Thursday. I doubt we'll be able to watch the whole thing here too, but maybe something you can sample that might tie in
that
with
sounds interesting.
some of the themes of this
And
show.
what network is that on, or what streaming platform is that
That's
on?
on Netflix. That's on Netflix this week. And then next week, of course, not only do we have the second episode of our show, but Rooster premieres. And not only can we talk about, this is that Steve Carell, also set on a university. This is a comedic, like this guy going through a frat period in his midlife. So maybe something that interestingly ties into this. But this comes from Bill Lawrence, which is another thing we might be able to talk about, is the fact that Sona, not only does Bill Lawrence have Rooster week to week, he, of course, just last week premiered the Scrubs reboot, which is also a Bill Lawrence show.
Right.
Currently on the air, I'm way behind on this, but currently on the air is the 3rd season of Shrinking, also from Bill Lawrence.
Very behind, but yes.
And later this year, in the summer, we get another season of Ted Lasso. And later in the summer, end of summer, maybe early fall, we get another season of Bad Monkey. So I'm like, holy cow, Bill Lawrence, how many shows could this guy have on the air at the same time?
It's good to be Bill Lawrence.
It certainly is. So we do have Rooster week to week. We have a new murder mystery thriller next week. This is next week from on Amazon Prime, I should say, starring Nicole Kidman, Jamie Lee Curtis, two of your favorite actresses. A Patricia Cornwell adaptation called Scarpetta.
I used to be a huge Patricia Cornwell fan.
But
the way I said it, it sounded like something tragic happened between me and Patricia Cornwell. No, I just stopped reading those books because I think we've talked about this before, with any really prolific suspense writer, once you read several of the novels, you realize there's kind of a formula to the way the story goes. And once you figured out the formula, the books are not as enjoyable, at least not for me. I had the same experience with James Patterson. But I do think the Patricia Cornwell books are great. I think Scarpetta is a great character. So that's interesting that they made it into a television series.
So yeah, maybe we'll sample that also, maybe just a couple episodes and see if we want to pursue it or not. It is a binge, but I doubt we'll be able to binge a whole show in between during our coverage. But maybe just sample it and see if you want to dip into it further or not. The following week, of course, we have the follow-up to the Oscars, so I'll probably have some coverage of any kind of surprises in there, as well as, of course, DTF continuing. And that same week, Sona, another show that I think you'll be interested in, Apple TV Plus, has what they are calling an unconventional thriller called Imperfect Women, starring and produced by...
Yes, I'm excited about this one. Yes.
So here's another one that we might dip into. It's Kerry Washington and Elizabeth Moss. Also, I think a book adaptation, but Imperfect Women, this one's called. So another series that we'll at least sample over the course of the month. The following week
seems like something that is right up my alley.
Yes, I think that's why I wanted to definitely put a pin in that one, because it's probably something that we probably will cover here in tandem. Although we won't be able to watch the whole series because there's no way we'll be able to cover all of this. Even if you do go week to week on that one, maybe it's something we'll come back to later.
You're on your own.
Oh, no. I mean, we could dip in because there is an opportunity for overlap, but I'll tell you why this might get too congested. By the way, did you watch the Comeback series?
I didn't. I heard good things about it, though.
It's coming back again.
Wow.
To HBO Max also on Sunday nights. So that's coming back in on the 22nd of this month. And also that same week, by the way, Sona, another binge on Netflix, something I'm very curious about. Is this a movie? Now I'm going to have to look to see if it's a movie, because maybe that is something we can watch. No, it's a series. So we probably won't be able to watch the whole thing. There's a series coming out called Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen. Have you heard about this?
I feel like that sounds familiar. Tell me more.
It is. I'm so intrigued by this. It might be a total disaster, but I'm so intrigued by it. It is labeled a horror series. It's from the Duffer Brothers, who made the Stranger Things series, very successful series, of course. But if you see the trailer, it basically is a woman on her preparing for her wedding. And it is the week leading up to her wedding. And basically it is just a straight up like rom-com, like, oh, it's your wedding week kind of thing. But the tone is that something horrible is going to happen. So it's like, if you ever saw this meme where they took the Different Strokes intro and they put like scary horror movie music on it and it made it.
No, I haven't seen that.
Everything just feels like a little bit off and disturbing for some reason. That basically is the trailer for this. It's all this images of people, but it's like, imagine you're like having preparing, you're getting dressed for your wedding or whatever, and there's no music on the soundtrack, and everyone's smiling a little too hard. And is something weird going on, or is this all happening in my head? So it's fascinating.
Not in a zany way, in a dark way.
In a dark way. No, in a dark way. It's very disturbing, but it is, you could play these scenes with like a different soundtrack. Again, it would be like you're watching a trailer for a rom-com. So I find it fascinating. Like, this could be a disaster, but I'm very curious to see if they can pull this off. And by the way, this cast we have here, we have Camilla Maroney from The Night Manager, our favorite actress. And we have the actor who played Albie on season 2 of The White Lotus. So 2 actors that I think very much intentionally cast for this reason. The couple are both actors that, you might, if you were on a New York City street, you might accidentally push them into a slush puddle, just accidentally. So I do wonder if that's intentional casting there or not. But It is an interesting combination of things for sure. And then Sona, the very next week, we have the 5th episode of DTF, but Your Friends and Neighbors comes back. So this is the reason I'm like, we can't possibly be covering Imperfect Women and Your Friends and Neighbors and DTF at the same time. But maybe when DTF wraps up the following week and we're still doing Your Friends and Neighbors, since they're both on Apple TV, maybe we do. As the end of that season comes up, we can talk about the 2 shows in parallel. So that's Imperfect Women and Your Friends and Neighbors. But plenty of stuff to discuss in the upcoming month.
When it rains, it pours.
Yeah, I mean, the release schedule is absolutely crazy this year. And I mean, we've been doubling up on shows throughout coverage this past month or so, and it's only going to get more so as things go forward. So yeah, a lot of things to discuss, a lot of things to look forward to. I'm very excited about James Marsden coming to Your Friends and Neighbors after seeing Jury Duty and Paradise last year. 2 really fun performances. So can't wait to see what he brings to Your Friends and Neighbors. So a very, very busy schedule. Your Friends and Neighbors, by the way, Apple's so confident in this show, they've already renewed it for season 3 before season 2 even came out.
Wow.
Okay, so this first episode of DTF St. Louis is called Cornhole. I like the the final moments in this episode where like, how did it all start? Cornhole. It all started because of cornhole. Before we get into any kind of breakdown, what did you think about this opening episode? I had mixed feelings. I liked certain things about it. The tone of it is very odd for me. So I'm very curious to see what you thought of it.
I enjoyed it. I felt intrigued by it. I do have questions about how all of this is going to develop that we can talk about
for 7 episodes, right?
As we get into it, because it seems like a fairly simple story at this point in time. So I can only imagine that there must be twists and turns and perhaps introduction of additional characters, because there's really only like 3.5 people involved in this story right now.
Yeah, I want to talk about that half person, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't even know who the actress is, to be honest with you. Because
I meant to look it up because I was kind of like, what are they doing here? Are we ever going to see her face?
I do wonder if that is, again, I think maybe we have seen too much in this show too early on. As some context setting, by the way, have you ever read the article that this show is based on?
I did not know that this show was based on an article, but I do want to say, while we're talking about articles, I know there has been a lot of gossip, I don't know the right word, about David Harbour lately.
Harbour, yes.
And I have not purposefully, but for whatever reason, I never really got interested in it or clicked through on those headlines of the horrible things he apparently did to Lily Allen. And I was happy I didn't, because I think it would have posed some challenges to me watching this. But I will wait until we're done watching this to find out all the horrible things he did to Lily Allen.
The unfortunately for you, although maybe you could do your own exploration as well, I probably will dip into it a little bit. I'll try to.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
The only reason I want to dip into it is because it's such an interesting thematic parallel.
Yeah, I could see that. From what little I've heard, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, so just as context setting for everybody, without getting into too much of the gossip, but first of all, I know you're a fan of Lily Allen, and I have not listened to the album, which is all about this in graphic detail.
Yeah.
But it goes into a lot of detail into, I mean, everything, all his sexual peccadillos, etc. So it is, a lot more information than, anybody probably needs to know, but I have not listened to it yet, but it's gotten very good reviews. But apparently this is just a little context setting for what I'm going to touch on later without going into too much explicit gossip, but just the fact that they had an open marriage. So the fact that he had relationships.
And did they both agree they had an open marriage?
Yes. So they had an open marriage on both sides. So this was part of their agreement. And she goes into this in detail in the album as well. But what happened was that he was on Raya, which is a dating app for famous people. So they could date other famous people and also just not have all their dirty laundry in public, I guess. But he was not clear in his Raya app that this was that there was that basically the agreement with him and Lily Allen were that it was an open relationship, but they could have no strings attached, which is very interesting in the context of this show. Once again, it's very hard to not connect the dots considering some of this, that the whole idea of this app supposedly is that it is for no string hookups. But apparently what her complaint was is that he got into serious relationships with multiple women. And some of these women who were obviously on Riot and somewhat famous knew them in some social context. So they were not aware of the fact that this was supposed to be a no strings thing. So he was doing like a boyfriend experience to some extent with these women. And then that's when this all came to a head, where it wasn't the fact that Alan found out he was with other women. It was the fact that he was having like emotional affairs with multiple women at the same time. And that was obviously manipulative, at least emotionally, if not in other ways as well.
Gotcha.
So it's complicated, but it is something I can't help but think about as I watch this show, because in some ways he has to be like, as he's making this show, he literally is having some of this dynamic in his own marriage, and it has to inform his, even though he's a victim here in the show to a large extent, that it has to inform his performance.
Certainly a murder victim. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Beyond that, though, I thought the show was a little odd in the fact. So I'm not even going to tell you the title of the article, which is a true story. By the way, the article is based on a true story. The facts are so different that I think even if I told you the outcome of that case, it wouldn't probably, I would guess, not be a spoiler for this series.
Okay.
But at the same time, I won't even tell you the title of the nonfiction article this is based on, because it would be a spoiler to what happened in the real world, period. So I'll just leave it at that. But every detail, like it's not a weatherman, it's not in St. Louis, it's not, almost everything. The very bare structure of two men who knew each other, who were in a love triangle with one of their wives. That is the extent of the framework that's shared between reality and this show. But I would probably say don't read the story until after you watch the show, in case they do decide to hew closely to any kind of facts in the actual investigation in the real world.
Gotcha.
But I did think this was a little weird to set things up. I thought this was a good hour of TV. I thought it had a good hook at the end. But like you said, I worry that there's enough here to make a TV series out of that lasts for 7 weeks.
Yeah, it feels like this could be resolved next week satisfactorily.
Very easily. Yeah. And the structure of the show is that in the first half, we meet the main players, 3.5 of them, as you mentioned. And we do have to talk about the half character for sure. But we see these two men who are in midlife crisis, bored with their marriages to a large extent, and egged on by the wiliest of wily Jason Bateman, always playing this odd variation of this character. And I very, very much want to get to just a talk about him and his performances. And then, of course, David Harbour, who's his translator. He's a weatherman. He's his translator, also saves his life, or, at least saves him from serious injury during this storm.
So, and I love that opening scene with the stop sign. I found it unusual. I feel like we live in one of the largest metropolitan areas there is, and our weather people do not have sign language companions.
Right.
So I thought it was strange that it seemed to be a given of the premise that the weatherman would have a sign language companion.
I have seen that only when you see like the YouTube videos of people flubbing their lines or whatever. That's sometimes. So I think it is maybe market by market that there's something that where you have it's also, but to your point, it is weird that they are very much setting this in 2018, which is another curiosity. The article that this is based on was written in 2017. So the crime or would-be crime, the suspicious event, let's call it, occurred at some point before 2017. It's interesting that they set this in 2018, which, they could make it all the way contemporary. Maybe we're so over surveilled now that it's not, this is more unrealistic. But to that point, now you can have closed captioning or whatever on your TV. But it seems that when you would see an actual weatherman or an anchor person with someone on the screen doing the translation, it was that's old time. That's like old school.
Right.
It's like 1980s or something, not 2018 or something.
I moved into a very loud apartment in 2002, and we started using the closed captioning on the TV all the time back then. So it's been available widely for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, so it's very strange. I do know that I think you probably remember this as well, when they used to have the closed captioning was somebody that, of course, this wasn't with, if you were watching a TV series where the closed captioning was included with the video file, but if you were watching the news where people were typing the actual words,
yes,
and sometimes
they
would type it incorrectly, and they would have to go back, and it was so distracting. If you were like in a dentist's office or something, the words were so far behind what was happening on the screen. You had to wait like 3 or 4 minutes for all the typos to be fixed.
And I will say that probably was the situation when we started watching TV with closed captioning on back in 2002. Do you remember there was a scandal? Gosh, I can't remember the context of it. It was some sort of national emergency where there was constantly a sign language interpreter, and it turned out that person had just been making up the signs the entire time.
Yes, and that's not that long ago, by the way.
But that was
in a public forum, not on TV. That would be hilarious if that was actually like people are watching at home, immediately being like, "What is that?" He's just like pretending to be a bird. Like, what's he doing now? Yes, I do remember that. Pretty funny. But the other odd thing about this is also the visual language of the series, written and directed by the same person, this Stephen Conrad, who mostly known as a screenwriter, but has also made some TV series in the past. And there's this style where you see the camera panning through with this kind of, the edges of the screen have this kind of fuzzy, out of focus style, and you kind of see the camera panning across, and as you see, like in the distance, the reporter interviewing somebody in a parking lot or something, which very much is the style of a lot of true crime miniseries. If you watch a lot of these true crime movies and miniseries, a lot of times during their reenactments, they'll have this kind of look. So it's odd that the show is playing with this visual style, and yeah, I just can't place it. I think in my mind, I was thinking this was going to be more of my impression of the show. And this is, again, talking to the structure of this episode is so strange. And maybe it will settle into what I'm about to describe. But my impression was that it was going to be definitely like Coen Brothers-esque in some ways, although even that is drier than I was expecting. I thought this was kind of a sex farce. And then at some point, someone ends up dead. But primarily it is a satire on the suburbs and a bit of a sex farce, and then maybe a murder mystery. The idea that we get to this murder mystery right in the middle, and there is some comedy here, but it's this whole episode of TV is, again, very odd tone that it is simultaneously funny and very sad. For me, anyway. The humor was only grounded in the sadness of the situation.
Well, do you think that the fuzziness maybe is partly due to the timeline? I'm not sure we've seen the present day yet.
You mean the present day of the investigation? We have, though, right? So all the time when we see Homer and Plum, his partner, I love her, by the way. Love this actress.
Yeah, she's great.
Immediately, you just know everything about her when you see her on screen for 2 minutes, which is fantastic. And of course, Homer's played by, what's this actor's name?
I'm trying to look it up for you.
Richard Jenkins, another great actor.
I got there at the exact same time. I got delayed for a second because did I miss Pedro Pascal in this, or is he coming later?
No, Pedro Pascal was originally cast in the David Harbour role, but I guess because Pedro Pascal is already in everything else, this was too much.
Okay, well, that's Google for you. Okay.
But I mean, a great cast, by the way, so far. I mean, everybody we've seen is just terrific. And Richard Jenkins here as the investigator. But I think that is the current timeline. And then, of course, we have the flashback to, I don't know how, it's not even that much. It's only weeks earlier, isn't it? It's not that much earlier
it's not much earlier. I think at one point they say it's less than 3 months.
Yeah. So all of this seems very, I'm not sure how they're going to, and I'll just trust that it will work itself out rather than continuing to dwell on it. But it doesn't feel like there's enough here for a series of TV, especially considering how far we get into it. It's not even like one of those things where we saw a whole comedic lark and they're like, oh, are we going to actually go through with this? And then you leave it there. And then we see in the final moments, which is, of course, is the total stereotype of this, in the final moments of the episode, we see David Harbour's body, right? And then, then we go back to the sex farce part of the story. And then maybe by episode 3, the detectives show up and etc. Right?
It's kind of like your friends and neighbors in that way, right? Where in the first episode, you saw that the one guy was dead at the foot of the stairs, and then
right, and then we have to circle back to that at some point in the show. And actually, to that point, whether you put that as the teaser at the very beginning or you put that as the button on the episode, that is kind of the stereotype. But of course, it exists for a reason. The fact that they literally split the episode in half and they show us the lead up to things, and then of course they show us the investigation in the second half of the episode. And then the button on the episode, which actually is a pretty interesting button, is the translation of what he had said to him earlier, that he knows that he is sleeping with the Linda Cardellini character, with his wife, which of course makes things very interesting that they were in this friendship when he was aware of this, which of course does change the context of the show. But again, raises more question marks of how that can structurally sustain a series for this amount of time. But I'm curious to see. I mean, if nothing else, I'm very curious to see if they're able to make this work. Let's talk about each one of these characters now. First of all, let's talk about Jason Bateman. I know you're a big fan of his.
Huge.
Like you, I literally remember seeing this guy when he was on Silver Spoons, and he was the annoying friend. And he was one of those people that I immediately remembered. Even as a kid, I immediately remembered him because he was a character that I sometimes liked and I sometimes hated. And that has literally been his brand for his entire life, for 50 years. It's an incredible, it's a 50-year career playing that same character that he played when he was what, 7, 6?
But I also think that speaks to his charisma and screen presence even back then. Because I watched a lot of TV shows back then, but I can't remember many of the supporting characters, but I remember him.
Right. Yeah, you knew he was going to be a star, like right away. But here he is again. You think about him, the Weasley character in Ozark, or to a comedic effect in Arrested Development. Someone who he oftentimes does the wrong thing, but you still somehow end up sympathizing for him. I thought it was very interesting. I know you haven't watched this yet, but maybe you have sampled it at least a little bit. Thought it was very interesting, slight variation on that in Black Rabbit, where he is just like, you just know that he's bad news from day one and he can't get out of his own way. But still, of course, because he is Jason Bateman, there is this likability to him. So it's interesting that they're using him in that way here. He is very much on his face, just a good guy. But of course, we know that he is also pushing, because there's like that. This is where it's an intriguing aspect to him using his persona, because he has the affectation of just being like a nice guy. But of course, he's also the one who's pushing to try out this new app. So there's like the darkness is there. He just hasn't presented it. But of course, his actions are hinting in that direction. It's actually an interesting performance on his part.
Depending how it all works out, I couldn't figure out whether it was Jason Bateman's character that was having poor judgment in the idea of signing on to this app, or David Harbour's character in believing that Jason Bateman's character would sign on to this app because he's a local celebrity and he's married. So why would you take that kind of risk of publicly being on an app?
I have the exact same qualm with the show, and I obviously have not seen what his profile would be if he obscured his face in some way or something.
Well, then I started thinking he never did do the app. This was all a setup for David Harbour to get on the app.
That's a really good point, that maybe he's showing him his version of his profile, but it is, that would be an interesting setup, that he sets up David Harbour to create the app as a pretense to come to Linda Cardellini's character and say, look, what I found, we were talking about this at work, and I think this is your husband. And then that gives him the green light to make a move on her. So that would be interesting, because I was seeing it as a plot hole that I'm like, you can't take this person who was not a weatherman, by the way, in the original story, that real life story, and to be like, I know who this guy is who bought this bicycle, by the way, because his billboard is right outside of my shop.
Right.
And he has a profile on a hookup site. Like, who's not going to know who he is immediately?
Right. So that's why I came up with that other explanation, or to possibly, I don't know, set up a murder for David Harbour also could work. But then I questioned David Harbour's character's intelligence, because he should have the same question about why would you do this when you're a local celebrity? You're going to get caught.
I also have issues with the show here, the idea that David Harbour is no longer sexually attracted to Linda Cardellini because she wears the umpire uniform, which is a very funny visual. They make her look as unappealing as possible. But
is that even a realistic umpire uniform? I have not watched a lot of Little League games, but this seemed very extreme.
The padding on the front of the suit, I mean, that is actually possible. And you can imagine that, if she has the excuse of this, I would say, is you can imagine having a generic padding for what you would assume is a much bigger man, of course. And, she is doing the work and wearing this thing. So it makes it look even more ridiculous and oversized on her smaller frame. So that's, or this could just be the way he sees it in his mind, either way. But the simple fact is, you still see her shapely legs, and
yes,
you see her running later on, which of course I think that's after Harbour's already dead, because it's in the present context. But point being that, I mean, when she takes off the umpire uniform, it does get to look at her in that context as well. Like, open your eyes, buddy.
He can only see the umpire uniform every time.
As soon as he closes his eyes, he sees the umpire uniform. It's like, open them and you'll be okay.
Look at the person actually in front of you.
So anyway, all of that is very funny, but also seems a little uncommon. But I do like the show, that the show goes, I know it's ridiculous. Like, he's acknowledging the fact that it's just like, yes, this is just my thing. What do you take of him? And to your point of Harbour's character, and I very much like Harbour as a performer, by the way. There's like this real warmth to him. There's something about this like big buffoonish guy that, of course, is what made him a star in Stranger Things. And now he's in the Marvel universe as well. Anyway, I am a fan of his in general. It's unfortunate that, some of this news has happened and kind of tainted my opinion of him. But I do think he always gives a very interesting performance. And there's like something that he just exudes on screen that I'm always generally a fan of. But to your point, they really show him to be this kind of guileless guy. You see him getting emotionally vested reading this Batman comic.
Yes.
And of course, you have like that nervous interaction where he apologizes for calling Jason Bateman by his last name. And then in like an awkward moment, he just tells me he has Peyronie's disease. I'm not sure if that's what you'll have the first conversation you have with somebody.
Yeah.
But despite the fact that some of this is kind of funny, and maybe if the tone was a little bit lighter, some of these jokes would land a little harder. But for me, since the show seems to ground itself a little bit, again, this is an issue I'm having with the tone here, that some of these interactions seem a little too silly to be in a more realistic version of the show. And I also feel like the whole thing where it's like, I can't have sex with my wife anymore because she umpires sometimes. It's a funny thing, but if it's going to lead to someone's murder, it's hard for me to, fully buy into this actual theory of the case, let's say. How did you feel? It's kind of like outlines this. Did you relate to this in a way, like this kind of midlife crisis? Not personally, but I mean, like, did you believe this is like a suburban universe that you believe in, or did you feel like this was a little too contrived?
I'm thinking about your question. I am willing to suspend my disbelief on some of the stranger stuff, like the umpire uniform, because I do enjoy these actors and I do enjoy this premise. So I didn't think too hard about it. What I did find unbelievable is I thought swing sets needed to be like cemented into the ground and let rest for a while. And they just relocated one in the middle of that cornhole party.
You know what? That is completely unrealistic. You do not need to cement them down, although you can. But, I helped my neighbor install their gym set and we just put the posts into the ground. But to your point, you don't just say, hey, can you help me move this over there? You have to put those things deep into the ground. It would be a much more effortful, to say the least. It would not just be like, hey, can we move this a few inches that way? It's not like you just, like a tent, you just put it and then you put a couple posts down. If you did that, the whole thing would topple over pretty quickly. I do like the reveal there, by the way, that he's just like, oh, I need to have them by the fence so that I can keep an eye on the girls when they're swinging. And actually, he wants to get a look at the neighbor.
So to get to your question, though, I guess it's not entirely believable, but I was willing to go along with it. It didn't bother me too much.
We can speculate on what we think the murder case might actually be outlined here, because obviously, if we're just like, well, the weird bicycle was in front of the pool. Why would you kill somebody at the pool? A public pool. Very strange. This whole setup is very weird. If this is a murder, bizarre, right? That you're like, I'm going to meet you at this place at 4:00 in the morning. You may not know they have cameras there, but it is a public place. This person, you poison them and they die there and you leave on your bike. I wonder if this is someone setting him up because that bike is so recognizable.
You think someone stole his bike, or you think he was really there, but then also somebody is setting him up?
I think it might be the half character who might have set him up.
Good point.
The part of the reason, this is me maybe overreading this, but the reason I think that this has got to be, it's in the language of the show. The half character, now just to make it clear for anybody who hasn't picked this up already, is I don't even know who the actress is who plays this role. It's the wife. It's Jason Bateman's wife, who, we obviously have Linda Cardellini, very recognizable on one side. David Harbour, very recognizable, right, from Stranger Things, one of the most popular shows in the history of the world. You have Jason Bateman, of course, incredibly recognizable. 3 incredibly recognizable actors in this love triangle. And then, of course, the Jason Bateman's wife, the fourth the fourth corner of this square, which usually gets delegated, ignored. Oftentimes when you have a love triangle, like in a film noir or something, there is no fourth, right? That's the whole point. There's the interloper. You have the couple and you have the interloper always, right? So he's the interloper, I guess, in this scenario. But the only question there is that, he actually has a wife and, they have their own issues, mostly because of their schedules being so out of whack.
Yeah.
But we don't even see her face. Like he's present at this barbecue. She's somewhere in the background. She talks to him from the other room and we don't see her face. At one point he says, okay, I'm going to go out to Outback. And finally, 2/3 of the way through the episode, we see her, but she's out of focus. I think we only see her face clearly towards the very end of the episode. But I think that's intentional. She is a non-character who is coming into focus in the story. And then I do wonder if that's a setup for eventually the forgotten character is actually the one who, leads to some kind of catastrophic outcome here.
Good point. Or it could be Linda Cardellini also, possibly.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if you watched the trailer for the rest of the season, but
I didn't.
This made me feel like it's probably not the case. They really set up Linda Cardellini as a femme fatale. She is manipulating the men in her life. But I think that's a selective edit because maybe to throw us off. I have a feeling, maybe I'm spoiling this show for myself right now, but just given the visual language, I feel like that fuzzy character who's out of focus, who's getting slowly more into focus, is very intentionally telling us something. It's a strange combination of things for sure. There was something specifically I wanted to ask you along the lines. Oh, okay. There's a big thing. Maybe the biggest mystery in this show is what's going on with this magazine he has with him, right? Which the show seems very focused on interpreting in multiple ways. And I think that is actually going to be important later on. I have a theory, by the way. Of course, I always have a theory.
Let's hear it.
I have a theory on that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the 2 police investigators, which, if we're going to spend a lot of time with this being a police procedural, I have to say that's not the show I thought I was going to get. But I
Right.
love both of these investigators. And I love that if the show is kind of unable to exactly nail down what it's trying to say about this suburban ennui or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that the culture clash between these two cops is very precise. They're two characters who are very different. They have different cultural perspectives. They want to allocate different amounts of effort to this case, but they're actually both smart and they're very different from each other, but they're both willing to learn from each other, which I thought was really good.
Well, one is begrudgingly learning from
Yes.
the other.
Well, that's part of the appeal, to be honest.
Yes. I actually identified with the female character quite a bit as a non-white woman in a very white male world, and the line you have to walk in not damaging the male ego, but also doing your job properly.
And I do like the fact that, there is a version of the story where the guy's just like, you're stepping on my toes, get out of my way. You're young. You don't know what you're talking about. And he does have that general attitude, but he does hear her out. And especially by the end of the episode, he's like, there is more to this than I thought. And yeah, I do like that begrudging acceptance that she knows stuff that he doesn't know.
You can't ignore that freaky looking bike.
You can't ignore it.
And she has all that porn knowledge.
Yes, I did love the relationship that she has with her husband, where they're just sitting there like going like, oh, wow, look at that one.
Yes.
Very porn positive in their marriage, apparently.
I did not know that phrase before last night. So
I didn't know either. See, we're on the other side of that conversation.
We really are.
Of course. That's who we are in this show, which is, by the way, the vast majority of the audience for this show is not going to be 20-year-olds. It's going to be 50-year-olds. That's what's going to happen as usual. Oh, yes. So the mystery of the picture, right? I do like all the analysis of this picture where she's like, this is not pornography. He's not even aroused. I did like all that breaking down the analysis of this. And she has to go and do research at home. Like, let me see what happens when I Google Indiana Jones
This were the type of thing I was into. Yeah.
It's very funny. What would you actually expect to see? My theory, this is my theory. My theory is that what gives this away is when they say, why is the face scratched out?
Yes.
And my theory is that this is David Harbour.
I thought of that too, because they keep talking about how he's out of shape. He wants to get back into shape.
Yes, I think that when he was younger, this is Indiana Jones, right? So this is like 20 years earlier, right? 2018, Indiana Jones is 80 something, right? The last Indiana Jones movie came out in 89. So you're looking at 30 years earlier. So he did a Playgirl spread or something, and he was in good shape enough to be a model in one of these things. And this is him being like, that's what I used to look like. And him obviously being like in this pathetic midlife, which makes me think that, honestly, this is another, I'm going to extrapolate on that. I don't think this is a murder. I think this might be, he's maybe even poisoning himself and sitting there and sadly gulping down this cocktail, this Bloody Mary, and maybe he dosed himself. Which, of course, this is part of the reason I thought this show actually is very sad, my reading of it, because that is how I'm reading that scene. And if I'm correct, this is a very, very sad outcome.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But yeah, so that's my theory. My theory is that, I mean, and like I said, the thing that gave it away is like, why is his face scratched out? Like, A, in the context of the show, but B, why, for us watching the show, why would they scratch out his face? Obviously, if we recognize him, then it, removes the mystery completely. Right. So yeah, that is the episode in a nutshell. Anything else that I missed along the way? Anything that you wanted to touch on?
I'm interested also, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get that much more development of this character, but I was interested in the dynamic between David Harbour and his stepson, because we open with that.
Yes.
The awkwardness of that. And, they try and play that game together. And there's an issue of
headbands,
generational issue of what a bread box is. So I am curious about that kid, but it feels like there's no reason to really learn more about him at this point, unless he's the murderer, which is always possible.
It's interesting. I had honestly only took the kid as comic effect, to comic effect here. But that's another thing that gives me some sympathy for David Harbour, of course, maybe dating Linda Cardellini, who he sees as out of his league, or maybe he was in much better shape at some point and she was attracted to him when he was a much more attractive person. I don't know how long they've been together, but I mean, the kid's only a teenager, so it's within the past 10 or 15 years or so. They obviously are having significant financial problems. He has to split the headbands game across 2 different credit cards.
Yikes.
But yeah, this kid is a monster. This is like everyone's nightmare of being an adoptive parent. I mean, from reading this, I assume they have not been together that long. If he'd been around for 10 years, this kid would not be so antagonistic towards him. I feel like this kid is acting out because this is a relatively recent divorce. I mean, like within the past 4 or 5 years, I'd say.
Right.
So he's been around, that's my guess. Like he's been around for maybe 4 years. They dated for a while, then they eventually married. But I mean, I also figure that like David Harbour, 4 years, or his character 4 years earlier was not in his Indiana Jones shape, even if that was the case. He probably was closer to this than he was to his other shape. By the way, speaking of the shape of his shape, I do wonder if this is a prosthetic belly. First of all, because I saw a behind the scenes where he's walking around with like like padding, under his shirt, the actor that is. But of course, when you see him with his shirt off, that is much more advanced. It's not just like padding. That is, it would have to be a much more extensive special effect or prosthetic, obviously, that looks completely realistic. So that's a much more advanced thing. But I do worry that David Harbour is messing with his weight, because on Stranger Things in season 2, he intentionally gained all of this weight. So he became really, really heavy on the show. And then he came back in season 3. Spoiler for if you didn't, you thought he was dead. Spoiler for the most popular show ever. But anyway, you think he's dead, and then he comes back, and he's in prison somewhere, and he has intentionally he made himself as heavy as possible, I think, in retrospect, so that he could become completely emaciated. So he lost all of this weight to be in the next season, and now, of course, he just recently was in Thunderbolts last year, where he was like worked out to be in a superhero show. And now potentially, if this is his actual body, I'm like, dude, you can't do the thing where you like gain and lose 20, 50 pounds between every single year. That's going to be really, really bad for your health. So I do hope this is a prosthetic, is basically what it comes down to. Like, do not be gaining and losing 50 pounds every 6 months for each project you're working on. So I do hope that he's not making himself unhealthy with some of these choices. So that's it. What do you expect for next week? I assume we're going to start seeing these hookups. They're going to start going on these dates. I am very curious how they explain if Jason Bateman is indeed on these apps. And you might be right that he's not. He might just be, maybe he runs. I mean, it would be interesting if it was Linda Cardellini has a profile on there also. And maybe that's how he meets her. That would be odd.
Yeah,
but
I wondered
then, of course,
about that too.
You would assume that David Harbour's character would also see that profile. You presume. Yeah, so I'm curious about that. I also wonder, when does he have the conversation about the app? Because the timeline's a little fuzzy, and I do wonder if it's like he meets Linda Cardellini at Cornhole at that event. They come over soon after. He starts flirting with her. One thing leads to another, and then that very awkward conversation where he just kind of like mentions, "Hey, you should install this app." Maybe he's pushing it because he has already begun the relationship with the Cardellini character. Do you think that's possible? If you had to guess one or the other, do you think that he is trying to entrap David Harbour into setting up the profile when we get into the official timeline, and it's because he's already started an affair with his wife, or do you think it goes the other way around, where they start messing around on the app and then he starts the affair with Linda Cardellini? Do you have a guess on either one of those?
I thought it was the first one, because I had that question about why a local celebrity would be on an app like that when he's married. So for that reason, I thought that maybe the whole thing is a setup and he actually has never been on the app. But who knows?
Yeah, I think we'll have to figure that out as we go along.
Yeah.
And if you had to guess, Do you think it's a murder? Like I told you my theory that I actually think that after a lot of maybe multiple investigations and red herrings, and is it the son? Is it the wife? Is it the other wife? Is it Linda Cardellini? Is it the obvious suspect right now, his friend? Do we not know? Is it just ambiguous in the end? We don't actually know what the root
For
cause
some
is.
reason, I do think it's a murder, or at least I want it to be a murder.
Yeah. I would prefer that it would be a murder that has some kind of twist to it. Although we've basically said every person we've seen, except for the police detectives, is a
all three and a
possible
half of
suspect.
them. Yep.
It could be him, could be his wife, could be his friend, or it could be his wife. It could be one of those.
The bike shop guy. I don't know.
That's true. One other character that we've met. I do love the bike shop commentary that he's just like, I know who bought that bike.
Yes.
We've only ever sold 2 of them to the same person.
Well, okay, maybe a clue there and that there's 2.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Right? We never heard that, something went wrong with the first one, so he came to get a second one. Why did he buy 2?
Yeah, good point. Why would you need a second one? That's a very good point.
Yeah. Maybe he was asleep at home with his one bike and somebody else was out with the other.
Well, I mean, I think even if his wife or someone else was out with the bike, that it would still seem, I mean, it'd be pretty easy to sneak the bike out of his garage. It was 4:00 in the morning, right? So it's not even like he was at work and someone else was in another bike. But you make a valid point. Like the bike, he might have lost the bike at some point, right? Like the reason he bought a second one is because someone stole his bike, and then who knows? Maybe
there you go.
Someone who's setting him up. But yeah, so curious. But what do you think it says? I mean, I think it's a very interesting character detail that this guy is always riding his bike everywhere. Like, is he trying to stay in shape, or is it because he wants to be green, or what does this signify that this guy is in this, like the most obnoxious version of a bicycle you can imagine?
I don't know what it's about, but it is off-putting. I feel like I wouldn't like a person who does this.
By default, you judge them immediately.
Yeah. And also living in New York City, it just feels like, man, you're just in a regular bicycle. You're so low to the ground. You're not going to survive this for that long.
Oh my God. In New York, it's not possible. This guy, he's riding through, I guess it's not St. Louis. It's probably like I was thinking because he's on TV, maybe he's
yeah, they
Louis.
make clear that it's a suburb, but still he looked like he was in like a proper road with like a left turn lane or something in it.
Yeah, he's signaling with his hands.
Yeah.
It's really a tricycle, no less, not even a bicycle, it's a tricycle.
And you're so low. I mean,
that's what you keep thinking about, how low you are. The exhaust, think about the exhaust you're getting.
Yes. One way or the other, this bike will be the end of you.
That's going to kill you. Just the exhaust will kill you. I did love, by the way, speaking of the comedy, which is there even in the sadness, and the tone, which is just the visual tone of the show, which is a little dark. But one more motif I wanted to bring up that I thought was interesting. There's all these songs that are used. They all reference sunshine in some way, right? They all have sunshine in the title. At least for this episode. I wonder if that's going to be a motif throughout the whole entire season. But the thing I was going to mention about the bike, which made me laugh, one of the few laugh out loud moments for me. I love that he shows up to be questioned by the police in his bicycle, because of course that is his mode of transport. That's how he gets around. Doesn't have a car, apparently. He does this all the time on this stupid bike. And then, of course, they question him. What was your bicycle doing over there? Was that your bike? And he's like, there's other. He's like, well, only 2 have been sold. And he kind of tries to divert it. And then at the end, Richard Jenkins goes, do you need a ride home? And he's like, no, I have my way.
Yes.
But admit that he had the bike with him.
Yes.
But of course, he had his bike with him. It's the only way he goes anywhere. That's the other reason I wonder about who the real perpetrator is. It's not only the fact that, he's like, I guess there's ways you can read that. I was going to say he's surprised to see that they have the picture of the bike, but he might just be surprised that there was surveillance at all. So
yes, I agree.
Yeah. So we will tune in next week. We'll find out more about whether this is a murder or not. What's up with these sad people? Do they at least have some fun sex along the way? Let's see what happens. Or is it going to be all very sad sex? Maybe it's very sad sex too. It could be the case.
Maybe.
It all remains to be seen. All right, Sona, thank you again for the conversation. And check out Vladimir this week on Netflix. I think it's Wednesday or Thursday. Check out maybe one episode of that and we can discuss it next week. Oh, and Rooster as well, which is premiering on HBO. If you want to check out that. It's only half an hour. That one's nice, short
Gotcha.
episode we can check out.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.